بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. We are continuing with the conditions of the prayer. So last time we discussed in length ستر al-awra, covering the awra, and istiqbal al-qibla, facing the qibla. And now we're going to talk about some more light ones, easier ones. We said, we're going to repeat some of them from last time. وترك الكلام وترك الأفعال الكثيرة. So in the prayer, it is not allowed to say something that is not from the sayings of prayer. So something other than Quran, dua, istighfar. Something, for example, such as saying Assalamu alaikum to someone. Something such as someone sneezing and you're replying Alhamdulillah, or sorry, Yarhamkumullah. Any other just conversation with someone praying, someone passing by, anything that's not part of the prayer it invalidates the prayer because it is a condition that you do not speak. The only exception made to this, as we discussed last time, is correcting the imam. This has to be the imam of your prayer. So hypothetically, if a different congregation was praying beside you and that imam made a mistake and you corrected him, your prayer would still be invalidated. You would have to only correct the imam of your prayer. وَتَرْكُ الْأَفْعَالِ الْكَثِيرَةِ, leaving too much actions. So anyone who is doing so many actions that it no longer looks like he is performing salah, he's someone who is scratching his head once in the prayer is okay. Someone who is doing it so much that someone looks at him and he no longer considers him, like he can't know that this is a person praying. I can look at someone and I can tell that they're praying even though they might be scratching their head. But if they're doing it so much that I actually in doubt that this person is praying, then that is too much action and it invalidates the prayer. And so here he mentions in detail the awra, which we discussed last time. So we're going to read over it again. وعورة الرجل ما بين السرة إلى الركبة والمرأة كلها عورة ما عدا الوجه والكفين وتكره الصلاة بالسراويل إلا إذا كان فوقها شيء. So as we said, the awra of a man is from his belly button until his knees, and for a woman, it's her entire body except for her face and her hands. Of course, with the detail that we mentioned last time. And it is makruh to pray salah in pants, and these are pants that show the shape of the body, except if there is something over it. Similarly, any other article of clothing that would show the shape of the body is makruh if it shows on its own. Meaning, if the shape of the body is seen due to external factors such as the wind or such as the rain, sometimes when clothes get wet, they stick to the body and they show the shape of the body. That is not makruh. What is makruh is something that shows the shape of the body on its own. Similarly, something that is slightly showing the color of the skin underneath it is makruh. As for something that completely shows what is underneath it, someone can look at the clothing and just completely see everything under the clothing, can see the body without much effort. Just by looking at it, you can see the body. Then it is as if he is not wearing anything. What is makruh and what fulfills the condition of the prayer is something that is only slightly transparent, something that the color of the body can be seen after a bit of concentration. As for something that you can see the body with no effort, someone praying in a sheet of plastic or something. 1 second. Yeah, someone praying in a sheet of plastic or something like that, then his prayer is invalid because it is as if he is not wearing anything. ومن تنجس ثوبه ولم يجد ثوبا غيره ولم يجد ماء يغسله لم يغسله به أو لم يكن عنده ما يلبس حتى يغسله وخاف خروج الوقت صلى بنجاسته. Someone who has a thobe, an article of clothing, but it is najis, it has najasa, it has urine or blood or something of the sort. If he is unable to clean it, and it's the only thing he has, or he is able to clean it, however, if he cleans it, then the prayer time will have left. In that case, he prays in najasa. Similarly, it is permissible to pray with something haram if it's the only thing you have, such as a man wearing pure silk. If he has other clothing, this would be invalid. Because the legal maxim is al-ma'dum shar'an kal-ma'dum hissan. What is absent in a Shari'i perspective, it is as if it is absent in real life. Meaning someone who has something that it is not permissible for him to wear, it is as if he is not wearing it. So this is the exception if this is the only thing he has. If he only has clothing made of pure silk for a man, of course a woman can do it, no problem. For a man, if he has silk, then he wears it if that's the only option he has. And if he has one article of clothing that is najis and the other one is made of silk, then he prays in the one made of silk, not the one that is najis. Okay. ولا يحل تأخير الصلاة لعدم الطهارة. So someone who has a najis article of clothing, it is not permissible for him to delay the prayer simply for this reason. Because as we said multiple times, the condition of praying on time is a priority when faced with the condition of praying without najasa. Time takes precedence over najasa, or rather a lack of najasa. وَمَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ عَصَى رَبَّهُ. Whoever does that, then he has disobeyed his Lord. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ مَا يَسْتُرُ بِهِ عَوْرَتَهُ صَلَّى عَرْيَانًا. So whoever does not have anything, not even a najis thobe, not even a article of silk, then he prays without clothing. As opposed to some others who might, their fatwa might be that you need to cover yourself with mud, or others who would tell you to pray while sitting down, as to not show your aura. For us, you pray as if you are normally praying, without clothing, if that is the only option. وَمَنْ أَخْطَأَ الْقِبْلَةِ. Whoever mistakes the qibla, أعاد في الوقت, he repeats in the time. وَكُلُّ إِعَادَةٍ فِي الْوَقْتِ فَهِيَ فَضِيلَةٌ. Any prayer that is only repeated in that time, it's a recommendation. And this is something I'm not sure if I said explicitly, but I hinted at multiple times, is that when it's recommended to repeat a prayer due to whatever reason, there are many reasons that could lead you to repeat a prayer. If the ruling is that you only repeat it in the time, then that means it is a recommendation. However, a prayer that is obligatory to repeat, then you repeat it during the prayer, and after the prayer, you can repeat it 10 years later. And these are the prayers that are invalid and they are obligatory to make up. Such as someone who someone who remembers that he prayed without wudu, someone who purposely prayed with najasa on him, knowing during the time of the prayer that he had najasa on him and he had another option. He had clean clothing, but he chose not to wear them. Or someone who purposely prays the opposite direction of the qibla. Stuff like this, it's obligatory to make it up, even if there's no expiration. You pray it, you have to repeat it even 10 years later. وكل ما تعاد منه الصلاة في الوقت فلا تعاد منه الفائتة والنافلة. So we have a category of reasons that would lead you to make up the prayer in the time. And as we just said, this category only applies to prayers that are made up as a recommendation rather than an obligation. This set of reasons, they do not lead you to repeat any nafila or any fa'ida. So someone who, for example, last time we discussed the light aura and the heavy aura. We said that the light aura, if it appears during prayer, then it is recommended to repeat it in the time. This is one example of the reasons that would allow you to repeat in the time. So this reason, if it were to happen in a nafila, there is no recommendation to repeat. There's nothing mashru' for you to repeat the prayer. Nothing legislated that would lead you to repeat this nafila for that reason. Similarly, a missed prayer. If someone is making up a prayer, whether he's making it up the next day or 10 years later, if he's making up the prayer, as soon as he says Assalamu alaikum, then that prayer time is ended. So anything that would lead you to repeat the prayer in the time as a recommendation, it doesn't apply to missed prayers because you're already past the prayer time as soon as you finish that prayer. So this only applies to obligations. As for a missed prayer, the only reason you would make it up is if the reason leading you to make up is a reason of obligation rather than a recommendation, such as making up a missed prayer without wudu or tayammum. Or, of course, when I'm saying without wudu, it's understood that it's someone who is capable of making wudu. Someone who simply forgot to make wudu, he has to make up that prayer even if it's a missed prayer. As for recommended reasons, then there is no recommendation to repeat any missed prayer. As soon as you finish a missed prayer or a nafila, then that is that. طيب. I'm going to give a brief introduction since we don't have enough time to finish the next section, which is the obligatory actions of prayer, but we also have a bit of time left. I'm going to discuss a bit of terminology. So we have something called fara'id al-salah, the fara'id of prayer, which is the plural of fard. We have words in the madhab such as fard, such as rukun, such as wajib, such as shart. So a fard is an obligation. A wajib is also an obligation. A rukun is a pillar. And a shart is a condition. In all the chapters of Maliki Fiqh, these mean the same thing. Almost. We're going to get into technicality. The only exception made is in Hajj. In Hajj, there's a difference between an obligation and a pillar, which we're going to get to when we study Hajj. But in every other chapter, including Salah, a pillar and a wajib, an obligation, is the same thing. A condition is also the same thing in meaning, but it is slightly different. Last time we discussed what a condition is. We said that a condition is something that its absence would necessitate absence, and its existence does not necessitate existence. So a condition of prayer, as we said, is istiqbal al-qibla, facing the qibla. Of course, with these conditions that we meant. So someone who does not face the qibla, then he has not prayed. And someone who does face the qibla does not mean that he has prayed, because he could have other reasons that prevent him from the salah being fulfilled. A fard a fard in prayer is the same thing. Its existence does not necessitate existence, and its absence necessitates absence. So someone who does not do a faridah, one of the fara'id of salah, then it is as if he has not prayed. For example, takbirat al-ihram, the saying Allahu Akbar to go into prayer, the first one. That is a fard. So someone who does not do this, then he has not prayed. And someone who does this, it does not mean he has prayed because there are other conditions he still has to fulfill. The only difference between a condition and a fard, a condition and a obligation or shart al-fard, is that a condition does not enter the reality of the act of worship, whereas a fard, an obligation or a pillar, is part of the actual act of worship. So, tahara. Tahara is not part of the actual prayer. Tahara is something that precedes the prayer, whether it's taharat al-hadath or taharat al-khabath. As for takbirat al-ihram, saying Allahu Akbar, doing ruku' and doing sujood, all these are fara'id. These are actually part of the reality of the prayer, part of the reality of this specific act of worship. And that's the difference between a condition and an obligation. The only difference is that an obligation or a pillar is something that is part of the actual worship versus a condition, which is something that precedes it or is outside of the, it's something more abstract, outside of the actual, the acts of the prayer. Or later on, we're going to get to fast or Hajj. These are this distinction that I made. It applies to all things, not just Salah. It's going to apply to many things that we're going to get to later, inshallah. So next time we're going to read the fara'id, the obligations of as-salah, and the sunan, and if we have time, the recommendations. Unfortunately, today I do not have time for questions, as I have a thing I must do. However, anyone who has any question pertaining to what we discussed today, you are more than welcome to send a message either to me directly or to the group chat, and it'll be answered, inshallah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. السلام عليكم.